In Baghdad today, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said this is a critical moment for Iraq's future. Kerry is in the capital, the country's capital, to meet with Iraq's bitterly divided leaders as fighters with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant continue their offensive towards Baghdad. Al Jazeera's Mike Viqueira is at the White House. And Mike, it was a strong show of support from Kerry during this surprise visit. Tell us more about his trip.
Well, it was a strong show of support on the one hand, David. You're absolutely right. But make no mistake, John Kerry, in the person of the United States government, was trying to put pressure on the Maliki government and those inside Iraq, in Baghdad, to reform their ways, to form a new inclusive government, to try to put an end to this somehow, to reach some sort of diplomatic or political solution. Obviously, that's not in the offing now as ISIL continues to make gains. Secretary Kerry was sent by President Obama, of course, last Thursday. The president himself announced it. He went to Europe to speak with close allies in the Middle East. They did not say specifically he was going to Iraq, though you could guess that he was, and sure enough, at about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, Secretary Kerry did show up in Iraq. And as you reported, he said it's a critical moment in Iraq's future. He said that Iraqi officials, by way of reform, said they are now committed to forming a new government. Remember, they've been more or less limbo since the elections way back in April. They have not formed that new government. They are now committed, says Kerry, to forming that government by July 1st. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say.
Iraq faces an existential threat, and Iraq's leaders have to meet that threat with the incredible urgency that it demands. The very future of Iraq depends on choices that will be made in the next days and weeks. And the future of Iraq depends primarily on the ability of Iraq's leaders to come together and take a stand united against ISIL. Not next week, not next month, but now.
And now American officials traveling with Secretary Kerry say the Iraqis were very keen, putting more pressure on the United States to come forward with military aid in the form of airstrikes. The United States doesn't seem any closer to that now, David. President Obama said in an interview that aired this morning that they have to get past their sectarian differences, do the Iraqis. No amount of military action will solve this problem. There has to be a coming together in Iraq, David.
Mike, as far as the sectarian differences, what is Secretary of State Kerry saying about the critics who believe that Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is simply not the person who can bridge them and that he ought to step down?
Well, there's something that the American government has to say in a situation like this, David, and that is it's up to the Iraqi people. And, of course, that is what we've heard time and time again from President Obama and Secretary Kerry and officials on down the line ever since this question of whether Maliki should stay or go has come up. But, look, make no mistake, the White House would not mind seeing somebody else in there. They, of course, were instrumental in bringing Maliki to the fore some 2 terms ago. Maliki now on the verge of perhaps serving his 3rd time, if in fact he remains prime minister after that July 1st deadline, David.
Al Jazeera's Mike Viqueira at the White House. Mike, thanks as always. Secretary of State Kerry's visit to Iraq came amidst conflicting reports about who is in charge of 2 border crossings. There were reports that ISIL fighters seized crossings on the borders with Syria and Jordan, but the government claims that security forces are in control of both facilities. This amateur video is said to show one of the crossings deserted and unmanned. Its authenticity has not been determined. ISIL fighters have seized 2 other crossings in recent days.